encourage your soul, enlighten your mind, and empower your faith. This is the Light Network.
Hello, and welcome to Wifey Wednesdays, a podcast for women who are seeking to be the best wives they can be. I'm your host, Emily Hatfield, and this is the show where the plan is always to do things God's way, especially our marriages. Today we are still live on location at Polishing the Pulpit in Sevierville, Tennessee, so don't mind the background if you're watching, but if you're listening, also don't mind the background, because who knows what random child may be screaming. Hopefully it's not mine. All right, so today we are continuing our trek through the Old Testament, and today we find ourselves in a pretty familiar account toward the end of the book of Genesis. We're going to be talking about Joseph today and how God is able to work all things together for good, even things that seem like there is no possible way. I feel quite confident that at multiple times throughout Joseph's life, if I were Joseph, I would have felt like there was just no way good was going to come. How is good going to come from the pit that my family threw me into? How is good going to come from the slavery that I find myself in? How is good going to come from the imprisonment I am facing because of a false accusation? How is good going to come as I sit in prison year after year? How? How can there be good? And I think the reason I'd struggle is because I am so very focused on myself most of the time. So much so that I forget to look up, to look out of the pit, to look out of the prison, to look beyond the false accusations, and to look to Jesus, the author and finisher of my salvation. You see, there were big things going on in the background of this story that we have the benefit of seeing, but Joseph absolutely did not. We see God moving the children of Israel toward Egypt. We see God moving Joseph into a position to be in a ruling place in Egypt in order to save these people to whom he had made a promise. These people who were of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, the people who were going to die in a famine were there not provision from God. And that provision came through Joseph. In a captive, castaway, slandered man, God had something bigger planned. It was bigger than Joseph's story. It was about God working to save his people, blessing his people, working for his people, always working for and on behalf of his chosen people. I love the end of Joseph's life when Jacob has died and the brothers are all worried again about all of the ways that they've treated their brother, and they're assured that he is going to do exactly what they would do if the roles were reversed: kill them, take vengeance, seek revenge. But that isn't Joseph. Instead, he says, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. What a response. And if you have been in a situation after grief or after hardship, you can see even more clearly just how profound these words are. What heartache this man has endured for most of his life. And while he is living in present blessing, I mean, they're pleasant as well, but they are present blessings, right? He has endured much to this point. And I think the key thing is this: he sees the past struggle and heartache and grief as a means to glorify God, not as yet another pit to be stuck in. He sees the present blessing as that, much more of a blessing. It's that much more blessed because he appreciates the vantage point of not being in a pit, not being in a prison, not being estranged from everyone and everything that he knows. Our lives, they're going to have mountaintops and they are going to have pits. And sometimes they are going to have seasons of time that remind us of Joseph, going from one bad thing to another. But if we choose to live in that, to see only the negative and focus on the situation that from that point, forward, we're just really seeing all of the bad things, we're going to be dragged into a place where we're stalled out. We're stuck. But if we choose to look on those seasons as a means to glorify God, then He will be glorified. And look at how great of a picture God can make from a life that has been broken. Who is expecting that Joseph, the one sold into slavery, will be the savior of the people? Who is expecting that this young, maybe mildly arrogant brother is going to find his way from the pit to the prison to the palace? This sounds more like a Hallmark movie. But it's better than that, because God has always been able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, because He does things for His glory and for our good in that order. Is it not true that we can often see God the clearest in our hardships or after our hardships? We see the blessings more when we've experienced a time without them. So whatever pit you find yourself in, whatever prison, whatever broken place, know this: God is able to deliver and use this in a grander way than you can imagine if you will let Him be glorified in your life. Or, hey, this is Wifey Wednesdays. He can be glorified in your marriage. Think about some of the hardest seasons of marriage. Do you think God is able to be glorified in your marriage after hardship, after loss, after sin has infiltrated one or both of your hearts? Not only is He able, but perhaps something grand is on the horizon. Maybe a soul will be reached that might not have otherwise, were it not for your example of faithfulness through hardship. Maybe someone else's struggling marriage will be strengthened when they see you fighting for each other and for God's plan for our homes. There is no limit to the glory that God can receive if we will open our lives to be used in His service. And not just used in the ways we want, but vulnerably expose ourselves and our lives and our messy moments for Him, letting hard things come in and rock us to our core so that He can be glorified. I highly doubt that Joseph's life is one that any of us would choose, or one that even he would have chosen. But knowing what we know now about Joseph's story and the way that God was using this to bring about salvation for His people, shouldn't we all say, "Here am I, send me"? God, if there is any way to use my life in a way that will bring people to You, do it. Allow it. Bring whatever hardship is coming, because I know that if You are there, there is nothing I cannot endure. Through Joseph, we see God's salvation for the literal children of Israel, the children of Jacob. And through Joseph, we see that God can be glorified in our hardship and in our heartache if we will give Him the space to be glorified, instead of turning it all back around on us and making everything about poor, pitiful me. No, let us use our heartaches to show an ever-present, ever-faithful God. And let us mirror His faithfulness and care in the relationships that we have, in the forgiveness and kindness and compassion that we see in an older, sorrow-filled, sorrow-experienced Joseph. All right. That's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you again for listening. I hope that you'll stay with me as we continue trekking through the Old Testament this season. Until next time, remember, love God, love your husband.